Okay, so who do you want the three permanent opponents for Alabama to be in the new upcoming football scheduling thingamajig?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. Jimmy, Sports Illustrated's Ross Dellinger has said that he believes that Alabama's three permanent opponents for the new SEC scheduling format will be Tennessee, Auburn, and LSU. Do you like this? Do you think it's fair? Or do you even think he's right?
He's probably right. I mean, Ross Dellinger is as locked in to the SEC as any reporter out there. Most of the time when Ross Dellinger has breaking news or even an opinion, I'm certainly interested. I don't discount it for at all. I don't think it's fair, just simply because I believe that it is possible to basically divide the SEC into 2/3 of what I would call the halves and 1/3 of what I would call the have-nots. And I know 16 doesn't easily divide by 3. And it's going to be rough, possibly for someone. And it's okay if that someone is Alabama. I mean, in the sense that if it's random, I just don't believe this is random. I believe that based on Dellinger's reporting, it appears that Alabama is the only team in the SEC that would be required to play all 3 halves, and they don't get a have-not. And if I looked around the whole league and saw, hey, math-wise, someone's just getting hosed. There's no way someone is playing 3 halves. Then I would be less upset about it. But actually, that's not the case at all, Luke. Per Dellinger's best guess or his best information, Tennessee's only playing 1 half and 2 have-nots. As I would divide the league, Tennessee's playing Vanderbilt and Kentucky. And Alabama gets no game like that. Alabama gets Tennessee, LSU, and Auburn, 3 traditional halves. So it's not equitable. It's not fair. I think here's the thing that gets to me, really. I think the subset of Alabama fans that aren't getting that are the ones that are saying, we've been playing Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU. What's everybody upset about? We've been doing that. That was the old format. There's a new scheduling format. Under the old format, there's West teams and there's East teams. Everybody in the West plays everybody in the West. Everybody in the East plays everybody in the East. You play 1 permanent opponent in the other division. For Alabama, that was Tennessee. That was fine. It was fair. Why was it fair? Everyone in the West played 1 team in the East, and it was equitably divided up. Yes, Ole Miss was assigned Vanderbilt, and you may say, see, that must be what you're talking about. That's unfair. Well, it is unfair, except when you consider Ole Miss doesn't ever win the West. Alabama's not competing with Ole Miss to win the West. Alabama, in fact, was really only competing with LSU and Auburn when they set this up to win the West. And LSU plays Florida every year. Auburn plays Georgia every year. So it was fair in the old format. Now we have a new format. And in the new format, Alabama is playing a harsher schedule than everyone else. Why? Apparently in the name of saving Alabama and LSU for ESPN's TV inventory. I get that Alabama LSU gets a lot of ratings and would get higher ratings than Alabama Mississippi State, but that doesn't mean this is fair to Alabama in any way. And, Georgia gets high ratings. They're getting Florida, who's tough, every year. And they're getting Auburn, who's a have for sure. But they also get South Carolina, who is a traditional have-not. I realize it's not the easiest game in the world, but compared to the rest of the SEC, they would be a have-not. I know I would trade Tennessee for South Carolina, So it's not fair the way that Nick Saban understands it. And that's why Nick Saban himself, hey, disagree with me all you want, folks, because I just appreciate that anybody listens to my opinion. All 100% of you can disagree with me, but understand that Nick Saban feels the exact same way I do, or I should say I feel the same way Nick does.
Here's something interesting too. A friend of ours on a text chain brought this up. Frankly, if Nick Saban hadn't been at LSU and then ultimately at Alabama, creating a rivalry, this wouldn't even be an issue. Nick Saban's the reason that LSU could be the permanent rival, because that's the only reason it's kind of sexy. Alabama traditionally has dominated this rivalry, even with Nick Saban has dominated this rivalry. It has more cachet because Nick Saban is there. But I would venture to say that if Nick Saban weren't at Alabama or never were at Alabama and this were still going down, it probably would not be LSU. I mean, I think Auburn, Tennessee certainly would still be there, but not LSU.
Our younger fans probably don't know this, but we only started playing LSU every single season when the league split into divisions in 1992. Back when it was just the SEC and there wasn't an East and a West, Alabama didn't play LSU every single year. In fact, Alabama has a longer history of playing Mississippi State, of playing Vanderbilt. Alabama, I believe, has played Vanderbilt more often than they played LSU. Now, we've played LSU every single year now for 30 years because of the divisions that were created in 1992. Maybe that's caught us up with Vanderbilt. I don't know. But Alabama LSU wasn't a long time, hey, they play every year going back to the 30s type of thing. Actually not. Now, they played most years. They played a lot of years. And I'm not saying I don't want to play LSU. I think what LSU doesn't get, I know they're only going to think of themselves. I understand that totally. So I'm only thinking of Alabama. But when LSU says, what's the problem? We don't mind. Alabama's big and bad. We don't mind playing them every year. Why do they mind playing us? Because you get Ole Miss. How about this? We'll play you every year. That's fine. And we won't play Tennessee. We'll play Ole Miss instead. We'll take that. It's not playing LSU every year. It's playing LSU and Tennessee and Auburn and not getting an Ole Miss, not getting a South Carolina, not getting a Kentucky or a Vandy. That's what it is. It's that. It's not, we don't play LSU every year. Why? Wouldn't matter to Alabama if we played Georgia every year or Oklahoma or Texas every year. Just don't give us 3 of them if everyone else is only getting 2.
And here's my thing. I am 100% with you. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
Auburn and Tennessee hadn't been all that dadgum good recently. Right. Now, Tennessee was good last year, but frankly, Alabama still should have won that game there in one of the most raucous environments in ages. We've dominated Tennessee. Auburn has certainly been closer, but I mean, we've done a pretty doggone good job against Auburn too. And frankly, we know how tough Auburn is for us, but Auburn has a bunch of bad losses here in the last 5-10 years. I mean, since 2014, I think Auburn has lost at least 4 games every single year.
Right.
So, I mean, you could make the argument if you were an LSU fan and wanted to retort that, hey, I'm not so sure playing Ole Miss is easier than Tennessee or Auburn necessarily. Right. But we know historically that will change, even if short term that argument is correct. And you could make the argument that all this is cyclical. But let me tell you what's not cyclical. South Carolina and Vanderbilt being stinky bodinky. They stay stinky. Now, South Carolina may upset a Clemson 2 years in a row or whatever they've done. Congratulations. I want South Carolina to be good. I hope they're good. Fact of the matter is they've played in one SEC title game.
The last time, Luke, we did scheduling format, the permanent scheduling format, what I talked about when we had an East and a West, and everybody played one permanent opponent in the other division. The day we set that up, probably the most competitive, best national game in the SEC at that time was Tennessee versus Florida. I mean, arguably Alabama was in the mix during that brief period of time in 1992. But actually the scheduling was set up in 90, 91 when they decided, we're going to divisions and this is how we're going to do it. That was kind of before Gene Stallings' success. But the point is, Tennessee-Florida was probably the premier elite game at that time. And I'm saying that as a way to demonstrate it's cyclical. Just like Luke said, these things change. Right now, Alabama's the best in the West and Georgia's the best in the East year after year after year. Although notice Alabama didn't win the West last year. Notice back in 1991, 92, when they went to this thing that Georgia wasn't then what they are now. It's all to some extent cyclical. That's why when you do the have and have not list, you got to go back years. You got to go back not 5 years, not 10 years, maybe longer than 25 years. I mean, who are the and I sort of do it by money, prestige, fan base size, just the general size of football, size of the program. So Tennessee's sort of a monster with their 100,000. They had a 100,000 seat stadium. I think at one time, Luke, only Michigan and Tennessee had 100,000 seat stadiums for sports in the world, and it was Michigan and Tennessee. So Tennessee's a monster program. Yeah, they were down a long time, but they're usually a have, and they're dang sure a have right now.
Jimmy, let me tell everybody about FanDuel. New customers get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, it's secure, it's fun. It's the best sportsbook app in the country, in the world. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes made to rebounds to fouls to whatever you want to bet on. You can bet on it at FanDuel.com. FanDuel lets you combine bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. Don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Didn't hear me? FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA and the NFL. Also, check out Locked On College Basketball. I mean, what a time to be alive, Jimmy. What a time to be alive. Go check out Locked On College Basketball. They'll fill you in on all the college basketball stuff coming up and talk a lot about bracketology, which everybody is a bracketologist these days. Jimmy, I want to talk about a couple of guys that On3 has recently predicted to the University of Alabama. This was very cool to me. What do you call it? Recruiting predicting machines. Of course, you wrote on 3. I think it's recruiting predicting machine. It reminds me of the George Michael sports machine, which was one of the best and yet dumbest ideas ever in the history of television. Dylan Stewart.
The acronym is cool. RPM is cool. The acronym RPM is cool. Recruiting prediction machine. I agree. It was, I'm sure that was a tough decision to land on that. And then they did. But here's the thing, maybe a great term, the big man in charge, I mean, he had come up with another term that's really good, but it's used by one of the other networks, so we can't use that one. So it had to be something new. RPM is new, and really it's a cool algorithm. It's a cool idea. It's set up differently than the way 24/7 does theirs. And really, when you say On3 predicted, what this is today was actually from the Alabama site, from Bama Insider. Andrew Bone and Joseph Hastings made these big predictions in terms of, and that's what it is. It's a prediction from the people who cover recruiting in terms of how a kid's recruitment will play out.
So the On3 number one player in the country, in the consensus, he's around number 23 or something, still a 5-star. But for On3, he's number one player in the country, and that's Dylan Stewart from Friendship Collegiate Academy in Washington, D.C., a 6'5", 235-pound edge player. They have predicted him to go to the University of Alabama, which would be amazing. He's already visited and had a great time. But they do put the caveat in there that, like, look, this is our early prediction, not exactly saying a commitment is imminent, but I do like that. They also predict DeMarcus Riddick from Chilton County to flip from Georgia to Alabama, another fantastic player. I'm going to look up really quickly where On3 has him. They've got him the number 37 player nationally, the number one linebacker in the country. So that would be rather huge, and I dig a lot. Also, while I'm looking at this, you don't even have to talk about him. While I'm looking at your list, On3 has Cam Coleman, the number 2 player in the state of Alabama. I got to watch Cam Coleman for Central Phoenix City play in the semifinals, and Cam Coleman's an athlete. I mean, he's a really good athlete. No need to go into him right now. He's a wide receiver out of Central Phoenix City. I would love to have him, but talk about DeMarcus Riddick and Dylan Stewart instead.
Yeah, Dylan Stewart, for those, and there's going to be a lot of listeners unfamiliar with these names because they're new, but Dylan Stewart, I guess I could describe this. He's literally this cycle's Keon Keeley. It's the best way to describe him. I'm not saying he's exactly like Keon, but extremely similar, same position, same ranking, basically. And, landing Dylan Stewart one cycle after landing Keon Keeley would be unbelievable. On three believes Dylan Stewart, as of now, is the best pass rusher in the United States in his class. Landing him, you'd have to beat everybody. There's no college football program that's not recruiting Dylan Stewart. So it would be huge. Just note that this is a prediction. It is not based on any sort of brand new news that came to Bama Insider. It's just like, hey, y'all make a prediction, and Hastings and Boner on board with, hey, as of today, we're predicting this. As of today, we think this could happen. So, don't write in ink, don't chisel it into a rock, but it's certainly encouraging that folks that talk to Dylan Stewart and have sources and know recruiting at Alabama extremely well are comfortable enough to predict, as of today, Dylan Stewart go to Alabama. Demarcus Riddick, same thing, committed to Georgia, but an in-state player. At the time he committed to Georgia, he did not have an Alabama offer, similar to Rock McElderry, or West McElderry a year ago, now known as Rock Montgomery. That guy, he committed to Georgia too before he had an Alabama offer. Alabama was able to flip him. Trying to do the same deal with Demarcus Riddick, who's a more highly regarded, highly recruited player than Rock Montgomery was. Now, Alabama's going to have to do some work. I don't think a flip is imminent, but I do think, as I put it the other day, I mean, he visited Alabama this weekend, even though he's committed to Georgia. Like I said on the site, that doesn't mean he's flipping to Alabama. It just means that he might. And before he visited Alabama, you could say, well, he's committed to Georgia and he's never visited Alabama. And from that, you would be pretty pessimistic about your chances. But now that he's been to camp, now that he voluntarily came to campus on his own dime to look around and then had nothing but great things to say about Alabama, and I say, well, he might flip. And today it's Joseph Hastings and Andrew Bone of Bama Insider telling you they're predicting that at some point he will flip to Alabama. And boy, when you add, Luke, Dylan Stewart and Demarcus Riddick to what they've already got in Julian Sayin and Jalen Mbakwe and Perry Thompson and Sterling Dixon, wow, just wow. I mean, it's another day to say, thank goodness our head football coach is Nick Saban, because the recruiting success is just nuts. And now all you got to do is just win all the football games. That's all that's left to do.
Yeah, I mean, what are you doing, Nick Saban? Win some games, dude. All right, let's take a break, Jimmy. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more SEC basketball. I was happy to see one of the comments on our latest podcast. Because we lead with football now. I mean, football is what most people want to discuss, despite the fact that Alabama just won the SEC, despite the fact that all the Brandon Miller stuff, whatever, despite the fact Nate Oates is kicking butt on the recruiting trail too, and all this other stuff. People apparently react more to football talk. But I was happy to see somebody in our recent comments say, hey, I'm not even worried about quarterbacking for next year. Why don't you talk basketball? Okay, we'll talk a little basketball right now. First of all, Brandon Miller will be an All-American. A consensus All-American. He was named All-American by Sporting News. That's one of the places you have to be considered a first-team All-American. I think he's Alabama's first-team All-American consensus. He's also named SEC Player of the Year, SEC Newcomer of the Year. Nate Oates did not get Coach of the Year. I can buy that because, I mean, Missouri's coach did well. Stackhouse did well. If they had given it to Buzz Williams, I could probably buy it. I mean, fine, you don't give it to Nate. I probably would have. I mean, he does have a team that went to the number one team in the country and was not picked to finish number one in the conference. But there are still some people who didn't vote Brandon Miller number one. I was listening to the Field of 68 today coming into work, and Tyler Hansborough, the former famously bloody-nosed player for North Carolina, they were talking about who should be an All-American. They listed their All-American list. Said, would you take anybody out? And most everybody was like, no. And he's like, well, I'd probably take out Brandon Miller and put in this guy. And I'm thinking, I mean, you must only be taking him out for something that you think he was literally involved in, like literally had a hand in. It has nothing to do with on the court stuff. On the court, Brandon Miller is clearly one of the top 5 players in the country and clearly deserves to be an All-American. Kevin Skarbinski, by the way, went on a show with Doug Amos, and I'm going to be on Doug Amos's show here very shortly, and said, hey, he's even heard more information that would exonerate Brandon Miller even more, but he can't go into it, which – I mean, thanks for the tease, bro.
I know what he's talking about.
Oh, well.
I'll say I know what he's talking about.
Thank you for the tease, bro.
I can't say. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. I wasn't going to say anything at all. But what I'm saying is, I don't think Skarbinski's making that up.
I don't either. And so in the end, though, a lot of accolades for this team. And I'm hoping that these 6 days off and the fact that all these other tournaments are going on sort of maybe takes the edge off of the whole situation. The only thing that does worry me is the further we go in the tournament, the more this is going to come right back into the light, right?
It's going to be discussed, and what's going to be discussed are the facts that are known. And what I hate is, I mean, I've talked about this a million times, but it just needs to be said again. It's so important. If you say Brandon Miller transported a gun to the murder scene, that is a true statement. It's true. It's sensational. It's a headline maker, and it's true. But it just lacks context. It lacks many other critical, important facts that you must know before you pass judgment on Brandon Miller. But people, it's a headline society. They don't want to get into the weeds. They don't want to know all the facts. They want to read the headline and then assume the worst. And like I've said all along, I'm real curious as to how the whole prosecution ends up going. I think there's way too many assumptions about even the underlying case against Darius Miles and his cousin. We need more facts before we pass total and complete judgment on those two guys, to say nothing of people on the periphery. I believe Brandon's on the periphery, and look, all the people that are just steaming mad. Why isn't Brandon Miller charged with a crime? Not even a misdemeanor. He's charged with nothing. Why is he charged with nothing? Because the district attorney's office has already told everyone, we don't have facts that line up with the violation of any law. Therefore, he's not charged. If we had different facts, he would be. But the facts we have don't line up with something he can be charged with. So you guys are upset over, and here's the thing. I mean, a lot of the people are upset or are extremely pro Second Amendment people. I mean, in Alabama, they passed a law on January 1st that basically said, I don't even know what the law is. I just basically know it's the Wild Wild West. You're free and legal to have a gun almost anywhere. And it wasn't even Brandon's gun, That's why it's like, how can you be super, hey, it's cool if everybody's armed, and then also, can you believe what Brandon Miller did? I mean, there's 2.5 guns for every one American. I imagine a lot of people are transporting guns to scenes all over the place, not intentionally participating in a crime.
Yeah. And, you hate that. I just hate that this thing's anyway. I mean, there's nothing to say. It really goes back to what's that old legal thing when you ask somebody, have you stopped beating your wife?
Yeah.
And they say, well, no, and you don't let them say, so you haven't stopped beating her.
Haven't stopped beating her wife.
Yes. So you were beating her, So,
right.
Anyway, that's going to do it for today.
It almost feels like that, but I do wish we'll see how many people. Let's just go down the road and we'll see how many of these harsh critics. I'm not just talking about Clay Travis. I'm not just talking about him. And he wouldn't backtrack on anything. If it was found that the evidence that the sky is blue, and we've finally proven it to him that the sky's blue. He's not going to go, hey, you know what? I'm convinced the sky's blue. I'm just talking about the fact that Brandon Miller's not nominated for some awards that he should be, or maybe he's not making Tyler Hansborough's All-American list because of what happened. I'm anxious to see, once all the facts are really known, if there's any backtracking, or maybe there won't be. Maybe I should be the opposite. Maybe there will be facts that further implicate Brandon, and my mind is open.
All right, that's going to do it for today's podcast. We will be back tomorrow with more. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.